The phone calls started at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning. Political reporters across Washington were frantically checking their sources, refreshing social media feeds, and double-checking their notification settings. Something unprecedented was happening. In American politics, or rather, something unprecedented wasn't happening. For the first time in 7 months, Donald Trump had gone completely silent. No morning truth social rants about the deep state. No surprise rally announcements. No interviews with friendly media outlets. No late-night phone calls to political allies that would leak to the press within hours. Nothing. Radio. Silence from the man who had dominated every news cycle, commanded every headline, and filled every political vacuum for over 200 days straight. By Sunday evening, the silence had become deafening. Campaign strategists were whispering in hushed tones about what this could mean. Democratic operatives were nervously joking that they didn't know how to react to a news cycle without Trump at the center. Republican insiders were either in full panic mode or claiming they knew exactly what was happening, though their stories didn't match. The speculation began almost immediately. Was this a calculated political move designed to create exactly this kind of buzz? Had something happened behind the scenes that we weren't being told about? Were there health concerns that the Trump camp was keeping under wraps? Or was this simply the calm before an even bigger storm? What made this weekend even more unusual was the timing. Just days before, Trump had been his typical hyperactive political self, posting dozens of times on social media, hinting at major announcements, and keeping the political world spinning at his usual breakneck pace. Then, suddenly, nothing. The last time Trump had gone this long without a public statement or social media post, he wasn't even president yet. This level of sustained silence from Trump in today's political climate isn't just unusual, it's virtually unthinkable. Until now. If you're as intrigued by this political mystery as we are, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're about to dive deep into what Trump's disappearance really means. And trust me, you don't want to miss what we've uncovered. The morning of Saturday, August 30th, 2025, should have been like any other weekend morning in Trump's world. For the past 7 months, Americans had grown accustomed to waking up to a barrage of truth social posts, usually starting before sunrise. Trump's digital morning routine had become as predictable as clockwork. Commentary on the previous days. News, attacks on political opponents, announcements about upcoming rallies, and his signature stream of consciousness political observations. But that Saturday morning, screens remained blank. Truth Social showed no new posts. No reporters were getting leaked information about impromptu press conferences. The usual cast of Trump allies weren't making their rounds on Sunday morning political shows to defend or explain the latest Trump controversy, because there wasn't one. To understand just how significant this silence is, we need to look at the pattern Trump has established since returning to active politics. Over the past 7 months, he has maintained an almost inhuman level of public engagement. Campaign events nearly every weekend, sometimes multiple events in a single day. Daily social media activity that often reached dozens of posts. Impromptu interviews with friendly media outlets. Constant statements responding to every political development. No matter how minor. This level of activity wasn't just about staying in the public eye, it had become Trump's primary political strategy. Every news cycle, every political development, every moment of national attention was an opportunity for Trump to insert himself into the conversation. His team had perfected the art of the strategic distraction, using his massive platform to shift attention away from unfavorable stories and toward topics where Trump felt he had the advantage. Political strategists on both sides had begun planning their moves around Trump's expected reactions. Democratic campaigns would time their announcements to avoid being overshadowed by Trump's predictable responses. Republican primary candidates had learned to brace themselves for potential Trump attacks that could derail their own campaign messaging. The entire political ecosystem had adapted to Trump's omnipresence, which is exactly why this weekend felt so jarring to political insiders. It's not just that Trump was quiet, it's that the entire rhythm of American political discourse suddenly felt off balance. The theories about Trump's silence began circulating almost immediately, and they ranged from the mundane to the extraordinary. The most optimistic explanation from Trump's perspective was that this was a calculated political move. Some Republican strategists suggested that Trump's team had recognized that his constant presence in the news cycle was beginning to work against him, potentially contributing to Trump fatigue among independent voters. This theory gained some credence when political analysts began noting that Trump's approval ratings had plateaued in recent weeks, despite his intense campaign schedule. Perhaps these strategists argued Trump was finally listening to advisors who had been urging him to be more selective about when and how he engaged with the media. A strategic silence could create anticipation for his next major announcement, while allowing other political stories to dominate the news cycle for a change. But this theory had significant flaws. Trump has never shown the discipline required for this kind of strategic silence. Throughout his political career, his inability to resist responding to criticism or inserting himself into trending topics has been one of his defining characteristics. The idea that he would suddenly develop this level of message discipline seemed unlikely to many observers who had watched him closely over the years. A more concerning theory began to emerge from sources close to the Trump campaign, though none would speak on the record. These sources suggested that Trump's silence might be related to significant legal developments that hadn't yet become public. With multiple legal cases still pending and investigations ongoing, the possibility that Trump's lawyers had advised him to maintain a low profile couldn't be ruled out. This theory gained traction when legal experts began noting that Trump's recent social media activity had increasingly touched on topics related to his various legal challenges. If prosecutors were preparing major new developments in any of his cases, Trump's legal team might have finally convinced him that social media silence was his best strategy for avoiding self-incrimination. However, this explanation also had problems. Trump had never shown much inclination to follow his lawyer's advice about staying quiet, especially when he felt he was being unfairly targeted. His history of public statements during legal proceedings suggested that even serious legal jeopardy was unlikely to keep him completely silent for this long. The third major theory was perhaps the most sensitive: questions about Trump's health. At 79 years old and maintaining an exhausting campaign schedule, some observers wondered if Trump's silence might indicate health issues that his campaign was trying to keep private. This theory was largely based on speculation, as there had been no public indications of health problems in Trump's recent appearances. But the health theory gained some momentum when political reporters began noting that Trump's last few public appearances had seemed slightly less energetic than usual. While Trump had still delivered his typical lengthy, high-energy rally speeches, some observers claimed to detect subtle differences in his demeanor and speaking patterns. Trump's campaign quickly moved to dismiss health-related speculation, with spokespersons insisting that the candidate was in excellent health and that his weekend schedule had simply been lighter than usual. However, the campaign's refusal to provide more specific details about Trump's activities during the silent period only fueled more speculation. By Monday morning, the political world was desperate for any sign of Trump's return to public engagement. Cable news networks that had built their programming around Trump's latest statements found themselves scrambling to fill airtime with analysis of his absence instead of his presence. Political talk show hosts who had grown accustomed to reacting to Trump's morning truth social posts were left to speculate about what his silence might mean. The impact of Trump's quiet weekend extended far beyond just media coverage. Other political figures who had learned to time their own announcements around Trump's expected reactions found themselves operating in uncharted territory. Without the predictable Trump response cycle, the normal rhythms of political communication were disrupted. Democratic politicians, in particular, seemed unsure how to respond to Trump's absence from the conversation. Several had prepared statements, responding to expected Trump attacks that never came. Others found their own policy announcements receiving more attention than usual simply because Trump wasn't dominating the news cycle with his reactions. For Republican primary candidates who had been struggling to break through the Trump noise, the quiet weekend presented an unexpected opportunity. For the first time in months, they could make statements and announcements without the immediate risk of being overshadowed by Trump's response. However, many seemed unsure how to capitalize on this rare opening, having grown accustomed to operating in Trump's shadow. The silence also highlighted just how much the modern Republican Party had become centered around Trump's personality and messaging. Without his constant stream of statements and social media posts, Republican talking points seemed scattered and unfocused. Party leaders who had learned to take their cues from Trump's latest pronouncements found themselves without clear direction. As the weekend stretched on, the speculation became increasingly intense. Political betting markets began offering odds on various theories about Trump's silence. Social media was filled with amateur detectives trying to piece together clues about Trump's whereabouts and activities. Flight tracking websites reported unusual interest in aircraft associated with Trump's travel. The mystery deepened when it became clear that even Trump's closest allies seemed genuinely unsure about what was happening. Several prominent Trump supporters, who typically served as informal spokespersons for his positions, were notably quiet themselves, suggesting they didn't have inside information about his plans. Some political observers began to wonder if Trump's silence was actually more significant than anyone realized. Had something fundamentally changed in Trump's approach to politics? Was this the beginning of a new, more disciplined phase of his campaign? Or was it simply an anomaly that would be forgotten as soon as Trump returned to his typical high-volume political style? The answers to these questions would have significant implications for the 2024 political landscape. If Trump had indeed decided to adopt a more selective approach to public engagement, it could change the entire dynamic of the Republican primary race and the general election campaign. Other candidates would need to adjust their strategies accordingly, and media coverage of politics might shift away from its Trump-centric focus. On the other hand, if Trump's silence was temporary and he returned to his typical high-volume approach, it might actually amplify his impact. The attention generated by his absence could make his return to public engagement even more significant, potentially giving him even more influence over political discourse than before. As Sunday evening approached, the political world was holding its collective breath, waiting to see what Monday morning would bring. Would Trump break his silence with a massive social media dump that would explain his weekend absence? Would he schedule a major rally or press conference to address the speculation? Or would the silence continue, leaving everyone to wonder what had really happened during his first quiet weekend in 7 months? The broader implications of Trump's silent weekend extend beyond just the immediate political speculation. This episode has highlighted just how much American political discourse has become dependent on Trump's constant presence and commentary. The fact that his absence for just 2 days could generate this level of attention and analysis shows the unique position he occupies in our political system. Whether Trump's silence was strategic, circumstantial, or something else entirely. It has served as a reminder of his continued dominance over American political attention, even when he's not saying anything. Trump remains the center of political conversation. The question now is what he'll do with all the attention his silence has generated, and whether this weekend will be remembered as a brief anomaly or the beginning of a new chapter in Trump's political story. As we continue to monitor this developing situation, one thing is clear. In American politics today, even Trump's silence speaks volumes. The reverberations from this quiet weekend are likely to be felt for weeks or even months to come, regardless of how Trump chooses to explain or address his unusual absence from the political spotlight.